I've already said it, but I'm going to say it again. June is about to get crazy. We're talking Miami football here with Brad Tejeda from Canes Insight, and I would encourage everybody to head on over there, Canes Insight, right here on YouTube, and we'll find out in just a minute from Brad all the various places that you can track him down and everybody over there at Canes Insight. Brad, how we doing today?
Doing great, Mark. Can't complain. As you just said, it is June 1st. The gates have opened. We talk recruiting pretty much every day with me and my close friends. And we have recruits on a weekly basis here at Canes Insight. And it's fun to see, the interviews of what we're doing now face to face, to finally see these young men get a chance to actually see these coaches, see these campuses, in the real world. It's going to be interesting to get, some of their thoughts.
So, Brad, a lot of college football fans that watch me, most of them love recruiting, but some of them don't. They just want to watch the games. They just want to keep up with the team. And they're like, when they sign, they sign. And they just need to know, basically, here's the deal. The reason why it's going to be so crazy is that because for the first time in forever, we've had a dead period that's run until today. Yeah. And basically, I saw some numbers the other day. I'm not going to try to regurgitate because they were long numbers, but basically they told us that only about 10% of the players that would typically be committed on a regular normal year are committed right now because the kids can't get on campus. They're not going to commit to somewhere they haven't been. So what does that mean? That means we're going to have like ridiculous activity over the next 6 weeks, 2-3 months. And these visitations that are going to occur starting with this weekend all over the country. We're focused on Miami here, but all over the country are going to be huge. So that said, what visits, what players, what particular weekends, however you want to phrase it, group it, really have you intrigued?
I mean, you talk about all over the country, Mark, but I mean, when it comes to Miami Hurricanes football, it's about dominating your state, right? We got to take control of our state in our own backyard. And just right off the bat, you got Florida State, who started at midnight. They did their whole midnight madness. They said, hey, we're going to beat the clock. And right at 12:01, we're going to get the tri-wheeler and get Mike Norvell out there with a few 5-star recruits and have fun. I think Julian Armella, who's the offensive lineman who Miami's going after for, was at the Florida State Midnight Madness as well. But it's all about first impressions, in my opinion. This is a very big day for a lot of universities all over the nation. But you got Florida State, who kind of kicked off at midnight, and then Miami of Florida, of course, kicking off today. There's a lot of big names out there and a lot of big targets, guys like Jaden Gibson, Isaiah Horton, 2 4-star wide receivers who are in play for not only Miami, but also Florida. Both of those young men will be at Florida today. They won't be making their way to Miami till June 11th. So they have the next, 2 to 3 days in Gainesville to kind of figure things out and how they could fit in Gainesville before Miami is even in the picture. And those are 2 big wide receivers that Miami likes. But going to Miami, obviously, we have a big day that's going to be starting, obviously, today. From everything I've heard, it starts at 5:30, the cookout, from what they've been calling out. You got, up to 20, 25 guys that will be there on campus today. I mean, lots of 4-star, 3-star guys, a lot of them in our own backyard. And then there's a ton that are from out of state as well, particularly the state of Louisiana. You got guys like Kamari Rogers, Jordan Allen, even Bryce Anderson as well. Those are 3 young men who all play for the 7-on-7 Louisiana bootlegger team. And those guys are all going to be in Miami today. And from what I've heard, Kamari Rogers, he flew in last night with his father, who is a very big fan of Miami, and they have already hung out with James Williams, Jake Garcia. They're loving campus life already, and this is one of the best corners in the nation. He was on Canes Insight. I think we had him on 2 weeks ago or last week, and he's phenomenal. He's one of the best in the nation. If Miami can get him along with a young guy at American Heritage like Jacoby Spells, you're looking at 2 quality guys at the cornerback position that we've needed for a very long time.
Like the video, share the videos out on social media, because if you enjoy the content, others will as well. And of course, track Brad over there on Canes Insight. You can find him right here on YouTube. You got the banner right there, Canes Insight. And of course, subscribe to both channels. All right, Brad, highlight some of the conversations that you've had with some of these athletes, because we want people to go over there and catch the full conversation. But in regards to, I'm sure you get a lot of the standard answers, but at the same time, maybe some things that came out that gave you some insight into what is really going to trigger a decision, or what is really going to, push the right buttons for any one player.
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, I think the two most common things that come from most of these players when we interview them is, for one, family. It's got to be family oriented. It's got to be not only about them. You got to involve mom, you got to involve dad, even uncle, aunts, grandmas, and you got to feel very comfortable with the coach. That's got to be number two. This coach has to feel either like your best friend, like your uncle, like a father figure. And you could see right off the bat with certain recruits. I'm not going to be, too specific in some guys, but you could tell just the vibe that they give off. Like it's very hard for, a 16, 17-year-old to kind of hide feelings when they talk about a certain coach. And you see that a lot with, a coach like Garen Justice. He is starting to build a lot of good relationships, where it seemed like, I would say about 3 to 4 months ago, when you look at the recruiting board as far as the offensive line, we always knew Julian Armella was one of those targets, not only because he was in our backyard, but he was one of the best in the country, and we were going after him. But there was not really many names else that we could kind of put our hands on and say, all right, Miami is either going after this guy or we have a really good shot at. Well, looking at June 1st now, we have about 7 to 8 targets that Miami is legit, top 2, top 3 schools for. And these are all 6'6", 6'7", even 6'8" guys. Guys like Cam Williams out of Texas. You got Jacob Hood out of Tennessee, who we also had on Kane's Inside as well. These are phenomenal offensive linemen, where if you could start to build that SEC type of quality guys, where they could come in and just learn the playbook, not have to just build their body for 2 to 3 years. You're looking at instant impact guys that you could build on top of the Lawrence Seymours, the Michael McLaughlins, and even the Isaiah Walkers.
Brad, when you look at the list of candidates, not that just will visit officially this month, but there's going to be a number of guys that are going to take unofficial visits, of course. And again, for some of these guys, they just want to see the place one time, and then they're going to make a decision. There's other guys that have it lined up for 3 or 4 or 5 straight weeks. They're going all over the place. Then they may, boom, that last weekend be able to say, okay, I visited those 5 places. I can make my decision. Other guys are going to wait for months and months. It's going to be all over the place. In regards to matching up Miami needs on the roster versus the talent that they're getting a pretty heavy lean on right now, who are those guys? Because there's going to be certain positions where, sure, they want this guy, but if they don't get him, they've got 2 or 3, 4 options that are just in the same range, where there are other situations where if you don't get that guy that you really want at that particular position, then they might be scrambling to find somebody else that's not even in their league. Do you get a feel for, out of their candidates list this month, out of the guys visiting, who are really, really key, not just because of their talent, but because of the need behind them? Who are those guys that they really, really need to reel in?
I mean, right off the bat, it's got to be number one, top of the list is Wesley Basant out of Miami Central, linebacker. He is also going to be at Miami today for the June 1st cookout. He has got to be at the top of the list. Doesn't matter the position. Doesn't matter what you think as far as the quality of the player. Wesley is number one. And it seems like throughout this recruiting process, he has been number one. So it seems like we're in a very good place with him. And if you look at the roster right now, the linebacker is still a question mark. That's something that we're still wanting to answer. So not only landing a guy like Wesley, who's the number one target in South Florida for that position, but if you can add to him and get someone like a Travius Lathan or a Demario Tolan, or even possibly a Devon Jackson as well, who's got phenomenal track speed, who could kind of fly all throughout this football field, which would be a very good player, in my opinion, and this Manny Diaz type of defense who could play multiple positions. The linebacker position is one. The other is obviously defensive end. We just got 3 defensive ends drafted in the NFL, 2 in the first round, right? We're starting to finally get a name for ourselves, coming back to the NFLU tradition, specifically at the defensive end. But one thing that we need to see is we need to see dominance back at that when it comes to recruiting. We got to land the big fish in our backyard. The Kenyatta Jacksons, the Marvin Jones Jr.'s, the Shamar Stewarts, the Nigel Kellys. Those are your 4 top defensive ends in South Florida. It really seemed like, Mark, for the past couple months, Miami was not really in play for any of them, and maybe one in Nigel Kelly. But the other 3 weren't really in play. Well, now, again, you come back to June 1st, and today you look at the list, and I believe every single one of those young men will be in Miami today. Nigel Kelly, Shamar Stewart, Kenyatta Jackson, and I believe the last one was Marvin Jones Jr. Yes, all 4 of those will be in Miami today, along with the 5th and Dante Anderson. So you got your top 5 targets that Miami is going after in the defensive end position, and they're all on campus today. So first day is a huge impression, in my opinion. And I think the thing that changes the most is the staff that you're looking at that are building these relationships with these young men. They are used to being in positions like this. The T-Robs, the Coach Ishes, the Jess Simpsons. These are relationship builders, right? They talk about it, in multiple interviews. You have to have guys around you that are relationship builders. And I think guys like DeMarcus Van Dyke and, of course, Pop Cooney are going to help a lot today.
So, Brad, you hit on something there that doesn't get talked about enough regards recruiting, because I think that most fans just focus on, well, if you win a lot, your coach can flash a bunch of championship rings and you can point them to the facility and say, we just spent $50 million on this and that. That's all important. But these guys are leaving home for the first time. They want relationships. They want to go somewhere where they can feel like they belong, they can trust, and have a mentor there and build those relationships. And in addition to all the good stuff and the winning the championships, of course, they want to have a place where they believe that they can aspire to that and then move on to the next level, of course. But the relationship building is something that you're talking about that I think it's completely discarded by most fans.
Yeah, and I mean, when it comes to relationship building in this process, it's usually pretty easy when you go back to the past couple of years. I mean, guys like Cooney, guys like Van Dyke, these guys were at the top of the list. Even Manny Diaz, when it comes to recruits coming on campus, they were very familiar on how things worked. Well, this whole COVID, this past year and a half, it has put a twist on a lot of things when it comes to interacting with these young men, right? And I think what I've realized in interviewing recruits is everyone's different, and even though they come off a certain way, I think the way they interact in person is going to set a whole different bar, not only with them, with their family, because they always talk a lot about their family. And that's a whole nother half of the interview that you're not even really getting to see. So the fact that these coaches are now, getting loose, just like these recruits all over the nation, it's a free for all to where some of these young men and some of these parents could fall in love day one to where they don't even need to worry about these other visits the rest of the month. Who knows what happens? So that's the most exciting thing about these next couple of days. You got June 1st, you got June 4th, June 11th, June 18th, and then June 25th. Those are pretty much the big market weekends as far as recruiting this whole month. And the good thing about with Miami is a lot of these young men that are going to be on campus today for June 1st, it's not an official visit for them. So guys like Shamar Stewart, Marvin Jones Jr., a lot of the defensive ends I named, for instance, these aren't official visits for them. These are unofficial visits just because they're in their own backyard. They don't have to go anywhere. Well, at the end of the month of June 25th through June 27th, not only are those official visits for some of the recruits that Miami are going to be holding, which most of them are out of state, which makes sense. But they're also going to be holding Paradise Camp that same weekend, which again is going to help a lot of these local recruits that we're going after that don't necessarily have to make Miami an official visit, but they are going to see them twice in a month, the beginning and the end of the month. So it's a win-win for Miami. And I think if they take advantage of some of these big names today and over the next 24 to 48 hours, like the Shamar Stewarts, like the Kenyatta Jacksons, if they can, get them to kind of think it over and even make an official visit or come back at the end of the month, it's a win for Miami.
Talking Canes recruiting, we got Brad Tejeda on the line from Canes Insight. Track him here on YouTube. Just type in Canes Insight. You'll find him right there, and the rest of the guys working on that platform that's outstanding. And Brad, I got to tell you, every time I have you on here, I get tons of feedback from people saying, got to have Brad on, have him on more, get him back on here. So it's always excellent. So follow Brad over there. We get him on here as much as we possibly can. He has got a lot going on. So we'll talk some Miami football here. So you brought something up early in the conversation about Miami, Florida State, that dynamic, and owning Florida.
Yeah.
So if we look back through recent, even past history, typically these are such great programs historically, maybe not necessarily now, but historically, that usually one of them's red hot on top of it, if not two of the three on top of it, and winning championships, competing for championships, and owning the state to a certain extent. We got a situation right now where Miami and Florida are in decent shape in different ways. Obviously, the Gators have been a little bit better on the field, the last couple of years, especially what they did last year. But they've got some negative things going on right now where they're not recruiting on top of their game. Dan Mullen's not necessarily known for that. Manny Diaz is inexperienced, but he's put together a coaching staff that's really good at recruiting. He's putting together now what could be a second consecutive really strong class on the fringe of the top 10. Florida State's been historically awful the last 3 or 4 years on the field, but they're showing a little vibe there. They got some juice going in the recruiting game. So can you kind of give us what you think the narrative is across the state in regards to where these three programs stand and who's got the upper hand and who owns particular areas of the state and just kind of where we stand right now in terms of perspective?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, unfortunately, any Florida State fans watching, they kind of been in the back for the past 4 to 5 years. If we're being honest, they have kind of gotten the scraps out of everything else. They're kind of reaching for and crawling for just about anything that's leftovers. But here currently, as far as with Florida State, they're getting a lot of guys who just wanted to be Florida State Seminoles, and it seems like they want to stay like that. You know, someone like Travis Hunter, who's a 5-star, someone like Sam McCall as well, who's supposed to be at Miami today, ended up going to Florida State, where he's recently committed to as well. So you got those two guys, Julian Armella as well, and then possibly someone like Marvin Jones Jr., who just like his father was at Florida State, could be another guy. That's just currently. But, you know, going past 4 or 5 years, they haven't really been much. When it comes to Florida, Miami, though, Mark, that's where it gets interesting. It seems like Florida is kind of owning, you know, the Jacksonville area, specifically certain high schools like Lakeland as well. Lakeland seems to be dominant Florida. And if you look in the past 5 years, Lakeland produces a lot of good football players as far as that high school. But the recruiting aspect, it seems like coaching is what really came into play, is where Florida just seemed like they had a lot more coaches that knew what they were doing as far as the recruiting aspect. Again, going back to relationship builders, they knew the pinpoints on what to hit with certain recruits, especially with their family members, to where anytime it seemed like Florida and Miami had a position battle, unfortunately, it seemed like Florida won most of the time. I think the only time Miami kind of won was the Leonard Taylor and the Nessa Silvera battle. And I think with both of those guys, they wanted to be at home from the get-go. But other than that, I think it just comes down to the relationship builders, the coaching staff, and Florida really cares about their football program a lot. They have no money dishing a lot of money into that system. For instance, Dan Mullen, who a lot of people thought every other year would be going to the NFL, like I thought myself, he just got an extension today for, I believe, 4 or 6 years. So he's going to be at Florida for a very long time, along with their basketball coach as well. Where with Miami, we're in a very different situation. As we all know, with Miami fans, we don't get enough money funded to the football program, in my opinion, when it comes to certain matters. But the proof is in the pudding. You got to put out potential product consistently in order to get that money funded to you when it comes down to it with this program. And Miami just hasn't done that. We got to do it consistently. And I think that also goes into the recruiting aspect and winning that battle with Florida, not necessarily in the state, but against the University of Florida as well. These recruits that we're going after, at the end of the day, they're seeing Florida on national television, you know, playing with the Alabamas, right? As good as Alabama was last year, went to championship, won it all. The team that gave them the biggest fight was the Florida Gators. And that leaves a little imprint, along with, you know, winning a bowl game and going to a big time, bowl consistently, which are things that Miami hasn't done yet. So I think the first thing that we need to do is we got to win the Coastal. We got to get to a bowl game and win a bowl game. That's something that Miami hasn't done consistently. And it goes all into our coach with Manny Diaz. Dan Mullen's not really on a hot seat. He's very comfortable with his extension, so there's not really much pressure on him. Well, with Manny Diaz, he's on a lot of pressure. It's his third year. He just hired pretty much a brand new coaching staff on defense. He's got all the keys, in my opinion, to win and to get to the big games. It's just a matter of him being the head coach to do it. You got the players, you got the coaches, you got 1 full year under a Rhett Lashley offense. So now we got to get to work and put out some W's.
Brad Tejeda, Canes Insight. We always appreciate the conversation with Brad. And Brad, we just want to make sure that everybody knows exactly where to find you, whether that be on Twitter, Canes Insight, everything that you guys have going on and what's coming up here in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, man, you can find me on Twitter at Tejeda Brad. That's TEJEDABRAD. I post most of my work and info on there. And then, as always, you can catch us on YouTube every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern time on the Canes Insight channel. That's CANESINSIGHT right below. We have a channel that we go on Wednesdays with me and my co-host Chris. We usually in this time we get recruits on a weekly basis, break down some film with them, and then we'll talk a little bit more recruiting. We had Larry Bluestein on, Kamari Rogers. Since we're here on the Mark Rogers Show, I might as well just say it before I even put it on social media. But tomorrow we expect to have on Jordan Allen and possibly Chris Graves. So one of the big targets that is going to be in Miami, not only today, but over the next 3 or 4 days. And Jordan Allen, we'll have him on tomorrow, see how everything's going over the weekend, how he's feeling with things. And we got a show on Sundays and Tuesdays tonight as well with different channels within the Canes Insight. So make sure you check it out.
Sweet. Great stuff. Canes Insight. We always hear good things, and Brad's done a great job every time he's jumped on here, or else I wouldn't ask him, and he knows he's got an open invite all the time. Brad, we appreciate you stopping by, man.
Thank you. You have a good one, man. Go Canes.
You too.